met my wife, my future wife, on Royal Caribbean. So I was working on cruise ships for Royal Caribbean. My wife came on, and I'll tell you, this is actually a really cool story, but it's a long story, but I'll tell you that another time if you want to. About her first day on the ship when she met me. It's crazy. Anyway, so we were on the ships. It's like 6-month contracts. I was halfway through mine. She just started. Anyway, so we kind of got together about only a couple of months before the end of my contract. I got off. She joined a new ship a couple of months later. And then basically what happened, we were like, okay, this is serious. This is something we're going to happen. And then we're like, okay, we're going to get married. Where should we get married? So we're like, okay, we'll come to Edmonton. So I came to Edmonton in 1998. And I always bet, whenever I used to gamble, I used to just play roulette and I gamble heavy on 8. So like, basically we're like, well, what day should we get married? Like 8th of August. So we're like, okay, cool, number 8. So 8898 was when I got my anniversary, right? So I came here, and my wife used to work in casinos. And she knew, I can't remember his name, it was Bob, I think it was. Really tall guy. He was a cool guy. He was a manager. I think one day we kind of bumped into him somewhere, and Rhonda's like, oh, yeah, Jon deals CRAPS. And he's like, oh, CRAPS is coming to Alberta. Do you want to come for a table test? And at the time, they were building Yellowhead. So I was like, yeah, come here. And I think he was working there. So I was like, okay, I'll go there. So I turn up there, and I walk through this construction zone, and there's a table there. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And so one of the things I learned a long, long time ago, most dealers have a preference. Like I have a preference dealing. I'm better on my left-hand side. Mm-hmm. Just right-handed, and when I used to throw chips and do things, I was always better on my left-hand side. So whenever I did a table test, I always stood on the left-hand side. So I'm like, well, I'll show, this is what I'm best at. I'll just deal here, and then they'll come and gamble this side. Anyway, so I go there, and I start, he's like, I'm dealing to Jimmy, and he starts throwing these bets in. So anyway, and he's trying to like complicate it, and I'm like, yeah, whatever, and I'm dealing away, and I'm whatever. And then I look up, and the entire end of the other table is full of people watching. And it was all like the managers, and there was other dealers, and there was all, well, not the dealers, but it was all management there, and people from the office. And I was like, what the hell? And they're playing, and I'm dealing away. And I think there was must have been about 4 to 5 people, which you don't really get that many people on tables test typically, right? And I'm like, whatever, like it doesn't make a difference to me. I'll just deal, and I was doing whatever, and I was betting. And so at the end of it, they're like, oh, okay. And then Jimmy just looked confused, and it was just like, what? And I'm like, okay, I don't know if they're going to. And then, anyway, afterwards, Bob said, yeah, you did awesome. He goes, man, that was so cool. He goes, but I don't think Jimmy's going to hire you because he couldn't understand what you were doing.
Oh my God. So you didn't get hired?
Wouldn't hire me, yeah. So I came, I was like, and I even said, look, man, I came, I got married. I said, I'm coming back probably next year. And they're like, oh, okay, they wouldn't hire me. I didn't get hired. I don't remember the last time I wasn't hired after doing a CRAPS table test. And I didn't get hired in Yellowhead. So, yeah, it was weird. So I was like, okay, whatever, I don't care. I was always willing to share whatever I knew, right? And to me, it was like, okay, I found it the most interesting part of the game was when somebody came in and did something unusual to gamble. And we're like, oh, man, we need to do like this ad hoc press. Like he'll do this, and then he'll drop it down, or do, you know what I mean? Like, okay. And we're kind of like doing it on the fly. Like somebody used to say like, oh, what's your favorite dice calls? I mean, after a while, a lot of them were just lyrics of a song, right? I mean, and my favorite ones were like the off the cuff ones where, it was a busy game and someone shouts, let the girl throw. And Sean was like, Ken, they want you to roll. Do you know what I mean? It was the witty banter like that. That was the stuff that I really enjoyed. It was like the witty banter that was quick. And, like a time when we were on, we were there dealing, and Lars was on stick, and his lens fell out of his glasses, just up onto the table, right? And the dice landed, and he couldn't see it because his lens just dropped out of his glasses. So when he landed, I just said, call it, because he couldn't see the dice. Do you know what I mean? I mean, for me, being on stick, a lot of people was like, do you know what a barker is?
No.
Brittany called them a barker. They were the guys that like outside markets, and they would shout, and they'd be like, trying to get you in to come in to sell you something. And really that was a purpose. I always thought that what the person on the stick is. You're trying to do something that's entertaining, engaging, with some innuendo to kind of draw attention to the game, and then draw them in, and then involve them, right? So a lot of the stuff is just, okay, it's just numbers and something that rhymes. It sounds kind of cool. And sometimes it's like, it sounds innuendo, whatever. But it was a really big stand-up when I first came to Edmonton. Because when I came, like I said, I came in 98. they still had craps, but at K-Days. So
Mhm.
I was like, man, I want to craps. And they're like, oh, it was a big wheel. I was like, what? My wife was like, yeah, it's a big wheel, like a Wheel of Fortune, and they spin it, and there's the two arrows. And then I was like, I've never seen anything like this. I got to go see it. So I remember going there, and I was like, this is the weirdest shit ever. You know, spinning these Wheels of Fortune. But what got me, though, was they still had a stick. I
Yeah.
was like, what is a stick for? I was like, well, they point to who gets the money. I said, man, you may as well have a big foam finger. Do you know what I mean? And just point. But but the problem is though, all those dealers never knew how to pace a game because there was no dice. And it's kind of a difficult thing to kind of learn if you've never had to deal it with dice, right? So once we went on there, and you see it now, you see new dealers, they don't know how to pace a game. And it would always drive me crazy when they would just wait until everything was paid out. And it's like, oh my God, this is such a monotonous pace, right? It was just driving me crazy. So I liked showing people stuff like, hey, this is a move, this may help you. Have you considered dealing like this? Like one of the things nobody ever really trained was the pass line, how to pay the pass line. Everyone's like, oh, I go out and they take the chips and they pay it. One of the things at the end, I always try to like challenge myself to do something, make it interesting. How can I do this better? And I always try to improve. I mean, I dealt it for 30,000 hours, right? So, well, probably more than that. So I always try to get better, and how can I do it better? And it got to a point where probably it was crazy, but I was like, okay, how can I leave the base and not come back with any chips? So I'll go there, I'll pay the line bet, I'll take everybody's center action bets, and I'll come back and I'll have no chips. I mean, sometimes it's like I could go out with no chips and go, okay, I'll take this chips, and I'll pay everybody out and come back and I just have no chips. So I always try to do things like that, right? And it was just really for me to be like, okay, how can this is kind of a boring game. Well, I can kind of deal it. How can I do this better anyway, right? Like when I was younger, and I didn't have responsibilities. I was married and have kids. Well, what I would do then if I got bored in the game, like, okay, I can do this. I've reached this as high as I can go. Well, I'll just find a better game, right? And then I'll go to London and high limit games, or I'll go to a gambling ship. I was working on a daily gambling ship, so I would go and try and because at a certain point you reach the kind of the peak of the game, right? And if you wanted to continue learning, well, you need to go to a different game, right?
Mm-hmm.
So. And that's what I did. I mean, that's why I traveled a lot, and I didn't have any responsibilities. I didn't have, kids or mortgages or anything like that when I was younger. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to go here now and go and work different places. And then you go and you meet new people and like, hey, have you thought of doing? So everything I did was all of like some of the stuff I thought of and some of the stuff people showed me, or it was a mix of things showed me. Like some of the things I was once shown, like was how do I like the tricks? Like tricks and that. But like, okay, how can you add a trick into a game? Into how you deal, right? The casino I originally worked in, because it was a provincial casino, so it was in the middle of nowhere, Cardiff. They did their own thing. It was really weird, and they didn't care about outsiders. And it was the only place I ever worked. They didn't have $25 chips.
Oh.
We had 10. So we had at the time back in Britain, we didn't have. You couldn't buy. The odds were slightly different, so you couldn't buy a 4 and a 10. The odds were 9.5 to 5.
Oh wow.
And yeah, right. And you couldn't make lay bets. So there was like, 11 to 5, 5 to 4, and 8 to 5. It was just, it was all odds, right? There was no buy bets. It was crazy. So the casino I worked in, for some reason, we had 25-cent chips, dollars, $5, $10, and $100, right? So we didn't have presses like everyone else does, like 6 to 60 with 10s.
Yeah.
We had minimums of $1.50. So I dealt with $1.50 on 6 and 8, $1.25 on the 5 and 9, and $2.50 on the 4 and 10. Oh, wow. And we'd have £1 a home. So it was like, crazy. It was so crazy. But we learned, I remember there was one guy there, and I don't know if you remember, like, you're dealing it, and you can flick the chip up off the top of a stack.
Yes.
Like, you can flick them into your...
Yeah, I've seen that.
Well, I was like, that's kind of cool. And I learned that one off some guy. I was like, that's kind of cool. I was like, I'll just do it while I'm dealing. So then we would go along, and I would flick up because we had 25-cent chips and whatever, and all the time, I would flick them up, and I would move quicker, and then they'd flick like that. Right? So I kind of like doing that kind of stuff. Well, yeah, the trick is cool, and it makes your hands dexterous, whatever, but how could you incorporate it into game to make you that little bit faster? And then we use throw chips. I mean, we throw them, we catch them, and all that kind of stuff, throw them into different hands, and that's the kind of stuff that, I kind of like doing, and shuffling them and stuff like that in your hand. And then, shuffle them in your hand is kind of cool, but then add them into a press, right? So some people were really good at it at different parts. I mean, yeah. So anyway, I really enjoyed dealing the game, you can probably tell. And I learned a lot off a lot of different people. And I learned a lot when I came to Edmonton too. Right? I mean, you'd always continue. I always found you always continue to learn this stuff. Right? I mean, someone comes up with something cool, and like, yeah, that was a kind of a cool thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
For me, the biggest thing I think it's you learn it. Like it's like everything else. Everything has to evolve, right? And everything has to be. But you still need to make like you showed something on Facebook the other day when it's like the electronic craps game,
Yeah.
which really was just like a slot machine, really, and the girl just moved the dice back and forth, right? I mean, where's the skill in that? Where's the and that was the big thing about I always found about craps, right? Is the players really liked it, and even when I gambled too. I mean, like you really liked it because it's like a group. You're all gambling together, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, like once you started taking all the skill out of it, and it's just one person playing a slot machine. I mean, like you lose some of the elements of the game, right?
Yeah.
To me, it would be like, why do I want to do that? I mean, I could just play craps online.
You're right. I guess the question is, how do we get that the art of craps back into the games?
I think you need to be really selective with the dealers you have. Like, I think more than any other game, craps is a personality game, right? You need people with personalities to deal this game because not everybody can go on stick and not everybody can be loud and shout and because a lot of people, typically I know like for me when I said I was going like and I was just this weird stammer and shit like that. I was a pretty outgoing guy, I still am, but I mean when I first went on it, I was just taunted and sweaty and audible, right? But once I used to it, I was like, oh, I'm an outgoing guy, so I was okay on stick, and but you need the right personalities to go on it because the stick is the most, I think, the most important position on there because it creates the atmosphere of the game, right? The calls and the pace of the game and how you involve the players. And I mean, I'm sure you've seen it too. You get someone who's really good on a stick, and then 20 minutes later, someone comes on and you're like, man, this game just died. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, coming in and it's like a trainee and you're like, oh, and they're like, oh, I don't know how to work out the bet. You know what I mean? So I think the dealers should get paid more. If you deal this game to the standard that you want, pay them more to keep them there. 2, handpick the players. Don't have like, here's a sign up. Anybody can sign up and anybody can deal it. Unfortunately, not everybody can, right? To a certain level of what you want. I mean, some being on stick and shouting all that other stuff in front of a big table full of people in front of the whole casino is daunting, right? And when you're first new, it's terrifying. So I think selecting the right people to deal it is a good start.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any other advice for the new dealer that's breaking into craps?
To breaking in, first thing I used to do, like, yeah, all the presses are good. You like a lot of them, like to be honest, I hated speed tests. I hated them because I didn't find they were realistic, but they really are just to improve your dexterity, right? There's that one, I can't remember what it was. There's a certain amount of all the chips, and you have to pay them all out and pick them all up and put them back in. I did that about 2 or 3 times in my entire dealing career, and I was like, man, I hate this because it's not realistic. Do you know what I mean? So I was like, nah, I don't like that one. I dealt other ones, but you want to have good hands, like practice your dexterity just to be able to deal and to whatever. Like pressing 6 to 60. I mean, it's a good chip exercise to build your dexterity and whatever, and a memory thing. Okay, this is there, and that's okay. But for me, like 1, improve your dexterity. 2, learn the player. I mean, I used to like if that player comes in, learn his name, learn how they play, and then just gradually go. You know what? Because if you're trying to pull tips, you're like, okay, I'm going to take over. And I used to do it like all new players. They'd be like, man, I'll have your game, whatever you're playing. In 20 minutes, I'll know everything you're going to do. I know your name. I know what you drink. I know how you play. I know the presses you want. I know the center action you want. I know the hard ways you want. If you have helping bets, I'll know them too, right? And when you have them. So then I'm like, yeah, man, we can take it over. And then, because what you do then, you shift the responsibility. All that guy wants to do is have a laugh, throw money and drink and have a laugh, right? But then for me, it'd be like, okay, as you go around, if he stops tipping, then all of a sudden he just gets his money back, right? So me, it's a service game, right? And so I would learn them and I go, okay, this is kind of cool. And then they reward this service, right? So anybody can just go, okay, so, here's your $7 or 14 or whatever, and then the guy throws it in. But then what are you learning? What are you doing? I mean, I would always do that. I mean, just because it's, for me, try and make the game a bit more interesting, have some involvement, because a lot of times you can stand around and just be like that. I mean, if they're just doing like 2 combats and the pass line, that's so boring, really. And it's like, yes, it's so, but it's like hardly a challenging game to deal, right? But if they're actually building center action bets, and the place bets and all that kind of stuff. I mean, really, I would just be like focused on people. Talk to the player, get to know the player, try and do it better. Right? Look at another thing I do is always look at the pass line. Okay, and this was one of the things I had. Sometimes I'd have I'd have 2 stacks of reds. So the one stack was like I knew I need say 22 reds or whatever, and I'll go out and I'll pay them all. I need this whites, greens, whatever. So I'll pick the line and I go out but I'd have a separate stack next to my so the greens, and I'd have another stack of white. So I need a full stack, whatever, and I take it. So many times the boxer will go, and they pull it away. I'm like, stop it, because I'm going to use it. Watch. So, but that was just something I did because I wanted to get better. I think, to be honest, if I could give any dealer any advice, is always challenge yourself to get better. Whatever it is, whatever position you're on, always try and challenge yourself to get better. Ask somebody else advice on how could I do this better? How would you do it? Or ask for advice. It doesn't mean you have to accept it. You just get another perspective of how to do it. And then maybe like for me, I always ask and always, I was like, I literally, however many years I dealt it, I would steal ideas like, man, that was so cool. I'm doing that from now on. And then you just forget and you just blend it into the way you deal, right? And I'm sure people did the same thing with me. Like, oh, John, that was kind of cool. I'll steal that too. And it becomes it's all kind of a big melting pot of other styles and other people's influences, right? So I'd always say, always try to be better than what you are right now. Right?
Oh, good answer. This is always the ending for our segment. It's the funniest story that you can share without getting in trouble.
Okay, I'll tell you this one story. I'm going to change the guy's name because, he may say this. But anyway, so I'll just keep it back in Cardiff because most of these stories have all been about Cardiff. So I'll keep it back in Cardiff. So back then, I used to like working New Year's Eve because in this casino, they would be drinks. They allow you to bring alcohol into on the break room with everybody's drinking and partying. And so anyway, so this night, and the managers were all getting drunk at the bar, and it was just crazy. It was like a really fun night. And going out on New Year's Eve was always crazy. It still is here, you know what I mean? So it was always a fun night to work, right? Because you just get drunk and deal and everybody's partying. Anyway, so we're dealing away and it's super busy. And literally, we have drinks under the table too. So we got beers under the table, we're drinking and carrying on dealing. Anyway, so this dealer comes back. I'm going to call him Bob. His name's not Bob, but I'm going to call him Bob anyway. So he comes up to the table and he's stoned, completely stoned. His eyes are bloodshot. He's off his head. And so we're there and we're like, oh my God, Bob's off his head. So the same boxman that was there when I did Charlie in the neck, he's like, oh my God. So we turned around and we looked at Bob and we're like, Bob, why is your ear so red? And he's like, what? So he starts rubbing his ear. And we're like, there's nothing wrong with his ear. We're just telling him this. So he's like, I don't know. We're like, Bob, man, what's wrong with your ear? So now all three of us, so it was me, the boxman, and the other dealer, are saying to Bob, what's your ear so red? So he's rubbing his ear. He's like, I don't know, but it's burning. It's burning. So he's just rubbing his ear. Now we got players walking up to him going, Bob, what's your ear so red? So he's like, he gets super paranoid. He goes, I've no idea, but my ear's burning. So now his ear is just like this. It's just beat red. And he's so paranoid, so off his head, he can't deal. He physically can't deal because he's just off his head. So he spent the entire rest of the night on stick. He couldn't work out the bets because he was off his head. And just moving the Dutch back and forth going, why is my ear so red? Why is my ear so red? Well, he was great. And all the players were coming up and go, Bob, what's wrong with your ear? It was freaking crazy.
Oh, John, thanks for the extra time. I really appreciate it. If you're open to it, there's going to be a lot of craps questions that probably have you as the expert for an Ask Me Anything for craps. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if I'm an expert. Like I said, I've been on it for 15 years. So I could give my opinion.
Close enough.
I would do it this way. This is what I would do. But yeah, this was fun. It was good catching up, and this was a kind of a fun way to reminisce, especially now that we can go out and do stuff.
All right, John, thank you so much for being on the channel. I totally appreciate having you on.
No problem. Anytime. See you, Jay. Have a good day.
Okay, I'll talk to you soon.